Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello friends, you've got MJ from the Coaches Panel. Number 15 in our 50 most relevant. We are getting real close to the coveted top 10 spot. It's an interesting player to get to. Joining me to talk about Josh Dunkley, I got fellow panellist Kane. Hello mate, how are you?
I'm very well, MJ. If Josh Dunkley was a stock in the back half of 2020, we went from top to dropping to a little bit more dropping. And I think he's still a guy at the moment that is super, super polarizing because some people just love him and they see the upside. And then some people are, I think rightfully, worried what Luke Beveridge will do with the absolute plethora of mids that he's got in his team.
Yeah, well, they have got an absolute bucket load. We have already talked about McRae. We've already talked about Bontempelli. We've already talked about Treloar in the 50 most relevant. You can go and read those articles at coachespanel.tv. But here's what I'll tell you before we look through any more of his profile, we talk about his previous history and what might eventuate in 2021. I'll tell you this. Had the trade gone through to Essendon, this was the bloke I earmarked as the number one for the 2021 50 most relevant. That's how clear and above I think he is in some certain scoring criteria. Had Adam Treloar not joined the club, I put him at about 8 or 9 inside these 50 most relevant. Yeah, I'm that crazy guy that's doing fantasy footy 11 and a half months a year, just like you. But now, just a little outside of the top 10. But if all the things go his way, we are looking at the clear number one forward in 2021.
MJ, I'll raise you one bit.
Oh, good.
Josh Dunkley is in a list of 5 or 6 guys I have. If they were the top scorer in either format, SuperCoach or DreamTeam, I would not be surprised. That is how high I have his scoring capabilities. Again, does that mean I see him as that guy?
Sure.
There's a lot of unknowns, but if you want to talk about if everything fell right, he's in that group of guys that could be that number one player in the competition. I think that says all we need to know. I know you're going to go deep. You always go deep into the numbers, but that's the type of fantasy profile he has.
It's true.
And he's shown it before. And I'll let you dive into your numbers because I know you put way too much work in them to not bring them up.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, he's only 24 years old. That's the biggest number I've found for you right there. At the Western Bulldogs, he is a DPP candidate for us. And in 2020, despite some interruptions both through injury and multiple roles, still delivered some really nice scores for us. Top scorer in AFL Fantasy last year against the Saints. It was a 108, while it was 151 against the West Coast Eagles. Kane's already alluded to the fact that he's got some really, really nice ceiling. 2019 against Melbourne, your boys, Kane. Boy, did he put on a clinic in 2019. He joined the 200 club in SuperCoach, a career high score of 202. In that same game, he wasn't far off a 200 as well. It was a 189. Last year, a seasonal average in DreamTeam and Fantasy of 77.7. You want to play the adjusted averages game, that's up around that 97 range. While in SuperCoach, again, maybe going, Dunkley didn't have a great year last year. 104, my friend, is the seasonal average. In that format, he's going to set you back just over 560K, 741,000 in AFL Fantasy, and in DreamTeam, just under 720,000. And we've already alluded to this 2020 year, haven't we, Kane? Like, it was up, down, left and right for Josh. He was, at one moment, he was leaving the club, another he's not. Another moment, he's leaving the club, another he's not. At one moment, he's a ruckman. At one moment, he's a defensive forward. At one moment, he's a defensive midfielder. Another moment, he's an attacking midfielder. Like, everything went crazy for Josh in 2020. And yet here we are looking at a guy that is so still fantasy relevant, irregardless of all these craziness in the moments that happened.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? If you've suffered a syndesmosis injury, often you don't even get back, let alone be able to perform at a decent level. And that's what Josh was able to do. You look at his averages when he returned, it's pretty much what he was delivering prior. Like, really, he went at 77 DT, which, is just about 96 if we want to do the conversion, and 103 SuperCoach. So you look at that, Alan, there wasn't a lot of, there was one big game, the game against West Coast when he had a 151 in SuperCoach, but the rest was, either low hundreds or, again, he didn't have really a bad game at all. It just wasn't the spectacular ones. His low score was 87. And then on the DT side, there was some lower games, but there was also, 2 above 100 unconverted. So the scoring power was there, albeit in a poor role. And for me, when I look at Josh and I think if he's delivering a converted 96 and 103 SuperCoach, which is what he's priced at anyway.
Yeah.
So if that's, even if it drops a few points, a course of a whole season playing that role.
Sure.
If that's sort of the downside for me, that's, it's a mid to low 90s guy in DT and probably a mid to high 90s guy in SuperCoach.
Yeah.
I think if that's my worst case scenario, that still puts him, at least in the top 10 forwards.
Yeah.
But I get really excited, obviously, about the upside. And if we jump back to 2019, MJ,
yes,
I know
please.
You've probably got these numbers in front of you, but he averaged 111 DT, 116 SuperCoach across the whole 22-game season. Rounds 1 to 6. And I'm going to backpedal 1 second because this is where some people were a bit upset with him. The back end of 2018, his last 6 games of the season, last 5, he went at 118 DT, 132 SuperCoach.
Huge.
So it was that huge back end of the season. We were all excited. We were all up and about to get on him in 2019 because the year prior, we'd seen Toby McLean inherit that back half of the season role, carry it on, and be a massive pick for us. We jump forward to 2019. We're all excited. Starts the season super slow. That mid-time's not quite there to the level. Goes at 78 DT, 86 SuperCoach. Has a shift into the midfield in round 7 and comes home in the last 16 games, 124 DT,
Amazing.
128 SuperCoach points, MJ. And if you look at some of the key numbers, and we talk about this a lot with those top-end guys, is what's the score build? You look at Josh Dunkley in this 16-game stretch, 32.7 disposals per game, 4.5 marks,
Yikes.
6.6 tackles a game. Like, if you can do that sort of stuff, if you can have a score build where you're getting that much of the ball, yet you can also rack up some solid mark numbers and some really, really strong tackle numbers.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the type of thing that makes you have that ability. Like, if you can go 124 for a 16-game season, MJ, like, you think about that, that's pretty much what the whole of 2020 was in terms of as a 17-game season, right?
Yeah.
And we had Max Gawn go at 98 converted, which is, funnily enough, just shy of the 124 that Josh Dunkley did for a 16-game stretch. So that's why I had him in that tier of guys that if it all fell right, this guy is a genuine number 1 player, regardless of his forward status.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane numbers.
What
and again, we didn't get to see it last year.
Yeah.
And you mentioned his ceiling. That's what it is. When you've got that ability to build your score that way, he did have a couple of, quieter games, I'd say, when he did have that midfield role. There was a 77 in there. There was a 71 in DT in that stretch.
Sure.
But when you can reel off scores of 145, 158, the 189, a 150, like, it just makes it so much easier. And that's what he has that separates him from a lot of other really good mids, is he can actually make up for, a poor score in the 70s with ceiling.
And that's what you need, isn't it? With these big boys that we're looking to pick, you need ceiling about them. He's got some inherent value in him. If you believe what we saw at the back of 2018, for 3/4 of 2019, and glimpses in 2020, if you believe he's going to get anywhere near those opportunities, not even recreate the 2019 back midfield role, but even anywhere near it, then he's right in the mix. Now, the benefit of him is if he was a midfielder, the risk certainly is much higher because now you're starting to pick him alongside the Crippses, the Sloans, the Heppels is a couple of 100,000 cheaper, the Tarantos, the Kellys who's underpriced, the Cornelios. And now all of a sudden you're going, oh, okay, the threshold of scoring, he has to be the 105 guy. He has to be the 110 guy. Because if he doesn't, then it hurts. But because he's a forward, the scoring threshold, even with some great top tier options, is considerably less. So a 95, which was his adjusted average, just a little under from last year, what he did the year prior in fantasy and dream team, or that low hundreds marker of the past few years in SuperCoach, even if he only goes 90 to 95, it's a dip of 5 to 10 points per game. Yeah, it's not ideal. So the worst case scenario is it's not quite as big and it doesn't hurt as much. As you love to say, conversely, if everything goes right, if he gets midfield moments, if he gets an attacking forward opportunity, because he scores through there. You look at what he did last year across his seasonal averages. He ranked fourth for tackles per game across the league and fourth for tackles inside 50s per game. So he brings something to this Western Bulldog unit as a one type of player that often they need multiples to fill. Yeah, Bontempelli's got some defensive components to him. McRae doesn't have heaps. Hunter doesn't have heaps. Treloar, just ask a Collingwood fan, doesn't have heaps of defensive work in them. What Dunkley does is he brings to that Western Bulldogs midfield rotation, however much he gets, ball-winning abilities, strong on the inside, above average on the outside. Yep, not elite, but he's above average on the outside. Incredible endurance, great defensive outwork, and a really strong overhead mark, who then, when he's up forward, uses all these same skill sets to apply ground ball pressure, defensive pressure, and a really nice goal sense. So for me, I look at all the upside. I look at what he's done over all the year, and then you've got to ask yourself this question. How bad could this go for me? Like, genuinely, what's the bottom that this could get? Where do you think, knowing he's fully fit, coming off a syndesmosis injury that you've alluded to, Kane, like, where could this go categorically pear-shaped for us? Is it that start to the 2019 season? Is that as bad as it's going to get?
Well, maybe. Again, that was 78 DT, 86 SuperCoach.
Yeah.
The hard thing for that is that was a bad stretch, clearly.
Yeah.
The other thing is he didn't have a good game in there, and he's just going to have good games. So sometimes, in seasons, that's just going to happen. So it's hard when you pluck out a sample size in a bigger year, because, the stats after show that he went absolutely nuts. He went crazy. Like, MJ, if we want to look back at, let's look back at a guy that was sensational last year, like a Lachie Neale.
Yeah.
Even him in his last 5 games, went at 79 DT. So let's call it, 99.
Sure.
And 107 SuperCoach. For a guy that was going at 146 SuperCoach beforehand, that does look a bit disastrous. The thing is, I think the worst case scenario is if he plays the similar role he had last year, albeit I don't see the ruck time going in there. I think he could fall to an 85 across the board.
Yeah.
So for me, there's 10 points of downside. Now, I think the potential of him getting back to 120 is maybe a 10% chance. I think the chances of him going to 85 is probably similar.
Yeah.
Again, for me, I think he gets back in the midfield personally, and I think he's probably around the 110 across the board. That's where I really have him. Again, in that forward line, that's clearly putting you in the top 6.
100%.
Again, as you mentioned off the top, 24 years old. We've already had some big scoring runs from this guy. And clearly, last year, the Bulldogs actually had a lot of health in that midfield unit. Tom Liberatore, who'd been injured a lot in the past, was almost back to his, third and fourth year
16
best.
Year best. Yeah.
So clearly that made it hard. But I think in terms of for Josh Dunkley to get in, but I think it made it really easy for Beveridge. I've got a guy off a syndesmosis injury. I've got Tom Liberatore absolutely killing it. I think now with a summer to construct this side, I can't see Josh Dunkley getting any less opportunity. So for me, I think there's a good chance he just holds.
Yeah.
And if he's holding what he's delivered, 96 and 104 across the formats, I'm more than comfortable with that as a forward.
Yeah.
Again, the reason I'm going with him is if I don't start him and he plays pure midfield role in a 4 to 5 week season,
He'll take the game away.
I'm going to have to. He's going to take the game away from me, and I'm going to have to make a decision then and there. Am I moving heaven and earth? Am I moving a premium player to this guy? For instance, an Isaac Heaney's not going to run away from me.
No.
Again, even if he has a great stretch, it's probably 110.
Yep.
If Josh Dunkley has a good stretch, it can be 140.
It's as good as anyone in the game. Yeah.
It's as good as anyone. Because if he pops one of those 160, 170, 180 games that he's shown he can do, now things get really tricky. So that's where when I'm looking at guys, I'd rather go with the guy that could hurt someone else.
Yeah.
And risk that he gets a poor role and is stuck in the forward line and, maybe I have to suffer through some 85s and 90s. But I also know that if anything happens to those midfielders and he regains that role, even if he doesn't start the season that way, I think in 2019, people learned their lesson. With Josh Dunkley, once you start him, unfortunately, you're going to have to hold at least till the bye because if anything happens around him, he's shown he can absorb that role and thrive. Yeah. So that's where I weigh it up and go, do I want to take a safe guy? And again, another safe guy is probably Dustin Martin.
Yeah.
I think we know what we're going to get with Dustin.
Yeah.
Super durable, super consistent, and it's always going to be around the top 10 forwards.
Yeah.
But personally, if you want to push into the top tier, I want a guy on my team that can take it away from other people and make people who don't start him have to think and have to make a decision and potentially have to use a trade sideways at round 2 or something like that to get on that train. Because we've seen if these guys leave the station, Lachie Neale last year, Jake Lloyd, Max Gawn, Grundy in previous years, and even the one that stands out a lot to me was Jackson McRae when he broke out a few years ago.
Yeah.
People thought it's a run, it's got to stop. I can't pay that much. And next thing you know, the guy's going 130 till he gets hurt. And that's the type of guy I want in my team because I want, if it's going to go right, and especially when I have the odds of it really going right as much as I have it going wrong.
Totally.
I want that guy in my team, MJ, because I just know it is so hard to recover when you're not on the end, if you're not on the team with that type of guy, especially when you've seen the ceiling before. It's there. We've seen it for stretches, long stretches.
Yeah, and that's even without the exclusive midfield role, even when playing in that forward line. Go back to his junior season and look at some of the numbers he did in 2016. He played almost exclusively as a pressure forward and a goal-kicking forward. What did he do in his third game of AFL footy? A 115 in AFL Fantasy and 89 in SuperCoach. Across that debut year, multiple tons, multiple 90s without midfield rotation. Yes, that's 5 years ago. I get that. But the point is this, as Kane so beautifully, mate, you talked about, the upside is so good and so strong, and the risk of not getting him as opposed to the risk of getting him and going wrong, I know which side of the risk I would rather choose to be on. The thing is that this too, and I'll get your take on in a minute, if someone already clicked on this podcast episode, chances are you've already got an opinion on him. You already go, I'm all in or I'm all out, and there's not one darn thing you've heard that's going to change your mind. Because even if you see Bevo playing through the Amy Community Series match in the midfield, you go, it's Beveridge. He's just moving the magnets. Also, you see him in the forward. You go, told ya. That's what he's doing it. But whatever your core belief is, I don't think many people are going to be swayed and moved because for whatever reason, legitimately or genuinely or not, people have closed their minds, for the better or worse, around Josh Dunkley.
Oh, MJ, you took the words directly out of my mouth. I think the preseason is not going to tell us anything.
Not a thing.
Because it can change for the better or for the worse.
Yeah.
Come round 2, 3, 4, whenever. Like, it's going to be how the team is playing. And that's going to be, if it works and Dunkley's in there, great. Conversely, if he's up forward and they're playing poor, again, as they say, Beveridge is going to spin the magnets. Now, I do get people who will take the opposite view, hoping for the downside. Absolutely. I get that. I want to have a look. I want to see how it goes. I don't think he's going to get off to that mega start. Maybe he starts well and it's 110 and I pay 50K more for him, but I want to have a look. All I would say with that is, and again, everyone can play it however they want. I think I've made my views on Josh Dunkley pretty clear.
I think so.
But I would just say the player you are taking him on with, you better be very confident in, because in that forward line, we're going to do previous podcasts where you quite quickly poked holes in some of the key players because they've all got some, especially at this stage of the preseason with, a few suffering injuries, a few, maybe not getting the role they've had in the past. You need to be very confident with the player you're taking this guy on with. Because as I said, same price, pound for pound, this guy can put 20 points on you a week. One player. And as I said, when you're forced to make a decision about a guy, hey, I have to get this guy now, or it's 50K extra next week because he's got a 180 to his name.
Yeah.
Just be prepared that if it goes that way, which clearly I'm hoping it does, be prepared. You might have to shake things up in your team to get this guy in because quite clearly he could be 10 points better than the next best forward. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
I think he will be. I think he will be better than Dangerfield and Sidebottom in 2021. I'm really comfortable that I think he's going to be the number one forward across the formats this year. And that's why, for me, I'm just starting him. Because if it goes wrong, which we've already said, the downside, it's not that far down for me this year. Yes, we've got a great top 7 or 8 forwards, but then the gap between 7 and 8 and 25, how big of a gap is it? Maybe not that much. So I would always err on the side of upside and growth of a player, knowing how big he could be, in contrast to the downside, where it's just
some people are wired differently though, MJ.
And that's fine too.
They want to see it. Again, the hard thing with seeing it is he could easily. Well, that's the thing. What if he starts midfield for 6-7 weeks and you go, oh my God, he's 125 plus. I got to get on. I got to get this guy. I can't watch another. How many times do you hear this? I can't watch another game or another round of footy not having this guy. And then what happens? The Bulldogs lose 2 or 3 games in a row. Hey, we need to switch this up. That's the risk as well, is you could easily bring this guy in, pay top dollar, and that role changes. So, again, we don't know how it's going to go, obviously. I'm just going to back a guy in that's shown me the ceiling of all ceilings, and he's a forward.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of chaos in that line now. And also, MJ, finally, he's not round 14 bye.
Oh,
finally.
Yes, we got one.
We can finally, again, plug a premium in that is going to be available for me in round 14. It's kind of nice.
Who would have thought? I think the key thing for you as you listen to this episode, and we'll talk drafting in a second, is simply this. The reason you hear Kane being really, really bullish, you hear me clearly quite confident to say I think he's the number one forward this year, is we've done our elements of research that we feel confident with what we see. You might do the same research and go, I don't see that. That's actually okay. That's the benefit of the preseason. It's about doing your research. It's about having good conversations, about seeing things, and then backing those decisions in. And whether you're right or you're wrong, ultimately time will be the great revealer. But just because I'm keen or Kane's keen doesn't mean you go, well, I pick them because the boys are. That's terrible way of playing fantasy footy.
We haven't seen your whole team, MJ. That's the thing. Yeah, when we make these decisions, it's based on our team. And as you said, the metrics we like. Again, someone might jump onto Fan Footy, say, and look at Josh Dunkley and go, he's only played 22 games in one season. He's only
exactly.
You look at how many, he's played 72 home and away games across 5 years.
Not in.
It's not great.
Yeah.
No one would say that's great. It's pretty much, what is it? Nearly 14 games a season. It doesn't sound great. You could question durability. Again, I think if you dig deeper, some of it was he was a young player that actually wasn't in the team.
Yeah.
But hey, there has been injuries in there, and there has been some form, and there clearly has been some role issues. So as you said, we're confident, clearly, but don't just take our word for it.
Do your work.
Put all of it into the pot. See the other players you may or may not like. You might love round 13. You might have Bulldogs coming out of everywhere, Blues, all that type of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your team. Again, I hope you've at least enjoyed the discussion around Dunkley, but again, that's why it's so fun, because something that me and you might gravitate towards as a really important metric in our research, people might go, I don't see the relevance of it.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough too. Good call, man. All right. Where's he going on draft day? Because as we mentioned right at the top of the episode and several times throughout, there's a varying range. For some, he could be as early as a late first round pick. For others, they might not want anything to do with him inside the first 5 rounds. Where's the sweet spot of getting Josh Dunkley, knowing how high the highest could be and that the lows could be based on where you might draft him on draft day, it could hurt you if it goes wrong. Where
Yeah.
are you picking him on draft day?
Yeah, this is tough because I've obviously put my hand on the table. So personally, I would love to get him. I'd love to have a pick on the turn. Give me pick 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And I'll take him there because, again, people talk about this player could win your draft. And the amount of times I hear people talk about a guy that could go from 84 mid to 92 mid, like, I'm sorry, that's not going to win you your draft. In all honesty, Josh Dunkley is the type of player that can win you your draft. We've talked about it a lot. If you're a back or a forward, add 10 points to your average to compare them to a mid or a ruck. Just by the way, the scarcity works across the positions. That's typically a very simple way of doing it.
Yeah.
So MJ, if I've got this guy as being, I think, 110 to 115, that's a 125 type of value. Like,
that's first round.
If the season finished and they said this guy is the most valuable player, you know, he's so much better than the 50th best forward, he's so much better than the 10th best forward, yada, yada, yada. That's where he could get to. Clearly, though, there are some safer guys. Yeah. There are genuinely some safer guys. But for me, if I can get him on 10 or 11, I'm really, really happy because he is a guy that is a genuine match winner. Worst case scenario, yes, if he goes 85, he's probably, I should have got him in about the 8th or 9th. Like, really, he's in a pack of so many of those forwards.
Yeah, and he'll still probably be your F1, though, in that case.
Exactly. Again, I'm taking that upside and that belief that I've got in Josh and his role, that I would take, again, the 1-2 turn, which is obviously a late 1, early 2. There will definitely be some drafts where he's available in the mid-third.
Yeah.
Is that where you've sort of got him? Where do you think?
I think he's a legit second-round pick for me. I think the sweet spot, knowing what we've got available in the forwards, knowing that how deep that top tier of forwards is, somewhere in that second round, I'd be really, really comfortable. If you have an early first-round pick, the dream is you lock away a Grundy, a Gawn type pick early on, maybe even a Lloyd you might choose to go for. And he might fall to you. That's where you've got to know your league as well. Know the trends that are coming through there. So, look,
would you take him over a Rory Laird as just a pluck a name out? Or would you take Rory Laird ahead of Dunkley?
It depends.
Because this is the type of player they're both available to you.
In what round?
Let's say you're at pick 10 and 11. You've got the turn.
Pick 10 and 11. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take them both.
You take both of them. That was a horrible thing to say. What about 9 and 12?
9 and 12. I'm taking Dunkley because I think there's more in the top end of defenders than there is in the top end of forwards. Even if it's because
I think that's the type of guy that people are going to be weighing him up with. I think he's getting into the Whitfield territory.
Yeah.
Again, some people have concerns about Whitfield's body, which drops him a little bit. I think he's in the Laird territory.
Yeah.
I think he's starting to get, obviously, side bottom he's going to be with just as a similar forward.
Yeah.
There'll be, depending on how Danger's next few weeks go, by the time drafts roll around, he'll be in that type of discussion. I know we're big on probably only 2 mids even going in the first 10 picks, just with the evenness of it. So that's where I've got him. But I can see a draft where people go,
no,
I'm a bit scared. I'm a bit scared, and I really like, I like a Laird. I like a Whitfield. I like a side bottom.
I'll take a Marshall. I'll take these guys. Yeah.
Again, he will be polarizing, and that's the hard thing about draft is how long do you wait? Because I think, personally, if I had a chance at getting him, again, around that late 1, early 2, I want to take him and plan and hope for the best.
Yeah, me too.
And again, people are wired differently, and they'll say, make him someone else's problem. But unfortunately, sometimes those are the guys that become your problem in the last 4 weeks of the season when you play them in finals.
That's a very good point. Well, there you go. That's what we think about Josh Dunkley. Do you agree or disagree? Get in touch with us over social media at the Coaches Panel and let us know what you think. You can go back and read the article right now at coachespanel.tv. All the players revealed so far, their articles are there. The links for the Spotify and Apple iTunes podcasts, you can get it via Google Podcasts as well. Go back and check them out. If you're just getting into your fantasy footy research for 2021, mate, there is hours and hours of reading and listening for you to catch up on. Go check it out. And, of course, if you're loving what you're getting from the Coaches Panel in 2021, join our Patreon supporter group. There's exclusive access to different contents, hidden groups, cash prizes, leagues, team reveals, heaps of stuff that you can get involved in. All the links for that you can find at coachespanel.tv. Well, we're nearly done of the teams. And you probably, if you're playing along at home, feel like you've got maybe 10, maybe 12. Gosh, maybe you're pretty confident with the 14 players that you think are left in my top 50. And maybe you're right, but have you got the order? Tomorrow, I might just ruin your order altogether.
Now give it truth, give it up.